Welcome back to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Drew. Today is Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. We're about halfway through this new moon cycle. About halfway. It's been terrible weather in Charlotte as of late, as far as astronomy goes, anyhow. Certainly haven't had a chance to test the astrograph again since I did the last episode and got to talk with you guys about it. Referring to the ASCAR SQA55 astrograph, which I very, very happily recently acquired. Absolutely love the telescope, but unfortunately I've been mostly just reading reviews on it because I haven't gotten a chance to play with it again. But as soon as I do, I will certainly update you guys. So thank you so much for tuning in this week. Sorry again about being off last week. I had a little family situation that I had to attend to, which of course happens to the best of us. So long story short, went down to Florida. Thought there might have been a pretty bad medical situation with my mother. Turns out it was not. So very, very thankful for that. Shout out to Mom. Glad you're okay and happy you'll be coming back home next week. So I was actually down in the Daytona Beach area of Florida, and I was only down for 4 days. Me and my brother Nick went, and my mother is actually down there helping her best friend recover from knee replacement surgery. And she had to go do a check-in with her pulmonary doctor. I won't get into all the details, but nonetheless, we got to spend four nights down there, and we were able to actually have a little bit of fun while we were down there too. I made a drive south from Daytona Beach, which if you're not familiar with Florida, and to be 100% clear, I was not at all familiar with Florida before this trip. I've only been 2 or 3 times in my life, I want to say. When I was a kid, I visited my grandparents down there. I think I was like 4 or 5 years old, so I barely remember it. And then a few years back, my wife and in-laws, we went down to St. Augustine, which is an awesome place to go, which is only about an hour north of where we were. So we actually passed St. Augustine on the way down and was able to see that. So anyway, while I was there, of course, I looked up at the night sky. I was able to take a couple of really nice nighttime beach walks by myself. And I love looking up at the stars from a different location. Anytime you get to move, north or south, a few or several degrees. If you're like me, you always notice the change of position of the stars, where the constellations normally are. And, being up much higher, being down south, like Scorpio, for example, was significantly higher than what I typically see at home, which was really cool to see, obviously. I didn't get to go to any dark sky sites while I was down there, unfortunately. Just didn't have enough time to. But certainly took advantage of the views while I could, walked on the beach at night. I do know that there are some dark sky areas down that way. I think if you head a little bit further south of where I was staying, there's the Cape Canaveral National Seashore. And a couple of friends told me that there are very dark skies to be had there. I mention it because I'll be going back in July on a actual real vacation and staying in the Orlando area, I believe. And we'll definitely be going to Cape Canaveral one day because I want to go check out NASA, see the Kennedy Space Center, and hopefully witness a launch. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see a launch. The day we left at noon, they did a launch. I was super tempted to stick around, but I wouldn't have got home until midnight because we drove. Had I stuck around for the launch, and my brother had to work the next day, so that wouldn't have been fair to him. So anyway, we were down there. We checked it out. It was cool. Didn't see any of the space stuff yet, but we'll definitely be checking that out when I go back in July and have a little bit more free time to spare. I did do some photography while I was there, which was a lot of fun. Actually met a pretty cool guy down on the beach one morning. I woke up super early to go photograph the sunrise over the Atlantic Ocean, and headed down to a pier because, you know, piers are great places to take photos of the sunrise, as everyone knows. And he was a relatively new photographer, and he was shooting Sony. If you're a longtime listener to the show, you know I shoot Canon. But I like Sony cameras. I get why people love them. They're very cool. You really can't go wrong nowadays with modern mirrorless cameras. There are no bad cameras. They're just more and less features. But you know, any picture that you take with any modern mirrorless camera is generally going to look pretty great if you know what you're doing. Anyhow, he and I were chatting a little bit, and I can't remember exactly how we got on the topic, but he told me about a bald eagle nest that was only about 10 minutes from where we were standing. And I had to check that out because bald eagles is one of my bucket list birds. So when we were back in Alaska in 2015, me and my wife saw plenty of bald eagles. Are everywhere there. But I was very, very new to photography at the time. The longest focal length lens I had was 300 millimeters. It was the classic 75 to 300 kit lens that comes with nearly every Canon Rebel that gets sold. And the quality was just garbage on those photos. I mean, you could tell it was a bald eagle, but that was about it. So it was great to be able to get a second chance at shooting them. So I packed up my gear, thanked Joseph profusely for telling me where the nest was because he didn't have to do that. And I headed into town. It was actually right in a Banks parking lot of all places. So the first thing I noticed was huge nests. Bald eagles make just insanely large nests. Apparently they can weigh up to a ton, which is kind of mind blowing to think about. And the nest was built kind of at the base where all the branches break off at the top of the tree. That's probably the only place they could build one and sustain all that weight. And inside the nest were two baby bald eagles. And I did not know, though I suppose if I'd have thought about it, I would have. Bald eagles don't have their bald head when they're babies. They're actually solid in color, brownish, blackish, depending on the baby. And then as they mature, they get that classic white head look to them. So I showed up and I was waiting outside and watching watching the nest and not seeing anything. And I was like, oh man, I hope they're not already gone. And brand new nest. I didn't know what to think, but I sat there and waited. And after about 15 minutes, I finally saw a little bit of movement in the nest. And long story short, there were two babies and the mommy and the daddy. The mommy was in the nest, but laying down with the two babies. And once she got up and started moving around a little bit and stretching her wings out, my jaw dropped. I was just blown away at how big and beautiful she was. And then about 15 minutes later, the daddy flew in, and God, I thought the mom was big. The dad was huge bird. So I was taking shots with my 100 to 400 millimeter lens and got a bunch of great shots. And then I actually broke out the big boy lens, the 800 f11, and it did a really good job shooting those. Not a lens that you would use for birds in flight, but since they were hanging out in the nest, I was able to take advantage of that lens. And there was really good lighting conditions because f11 obviously isn't ideal for photography. But if you have good lighting conditions, it's certainly a great lens that you can use. So if you'd like to check any of those out, I believe I shared them to the Astrocast Facebook page. I'll link that in the show notes. Go check them out and tell me what you think. I think they came out pretty good. Shout out one more time to Joseph for telling me about the nest. Greatly appreciate that very, very much. In other news, how about Venus? Did anyone get a chance to check it out at max magnitude brightness last week? I think it was right around Valentine's Day. It was at a minus 4.9 on the magnitude scale. It was crazy bright, and I was able to see it very well, luckily, and just kind of blew me away how bright it was. You forget how variable, I'd say stars, but, you know, obviously Venus being a planet, but how variable some of the stars are. And I think back to like Betelgeuse and how its brightness has changed over the years, and, you know, the great dimming of Betelgeuse, and then seeing Venus get brighter and brighter as it, you know, moves through our night sky and the months go on. But if you get a chance to check out Venus, still extremely bright right now, very, very beautiful, you know, in our western sky just after sunset. So definitely have a look at that if you haven't. In other news, I broke ground on my pier finally. So over the last weekend, I finally started kind of laying the groundwork for my pier. I dug a little bit of a hole. I leveled out said hole. I poured in a couple bags of paving stone, which is essentially like crushed up gravel, really, kind of like a mixture of sand and fine gravel. And I will be adding the sand soon, which will then be leveled out. And then I'm going to place a paver stone on top of that. And then I decided what I'm going to do is actually use cinder blocks initially. And kind of what my thought process here, because I know you guys have been listening to me talk about this for probably over a year now, about this pier / observatory situation. And my thought is I was wrestling with whether or not I should send my gear to a remote observatory to take advantage of darker skies, more clear nights, etc. But I really, really enjoy being hands-on with my equipment, and getting under the night sky is very important to me. But I also recognize the fact that, you know, pulling out all of my equipment, setting it up, and then breaking it all down and bringing it back in really can be a pain in the butt, and reduces the amount of time that I have to actually image on a day-to-day basis. So what I think a good compromise is to build more of a temporary pier for the first few months. I'm going to get a Tello Gizmos 365 cover for it. If you don't know, this is a company that makes telescope covers that you can place over your pier to cover up the telescope. And the name implies that you can, you know, leave it outside 365 days a year and it will be okay. I've done a lot of reading and research on these, and they seem legit. Now, obviously, they can't keep out humidity and moisture that could get in. Although I saw a video that Quiv the Lazy Geek did, where he mentioned using desiccant, I believe is how it's pronounced. And essentially, it's if you've ever seen those like dry silicone packets that are always come packaged in things, you know, do not eat, it says on the package, which is great advice. Anyway, he was able to kind of buy that in bulk and keep it inside underneath the cover, and it keeps everything really dry. So that would be an option. And obviously, if the weather gets really bad, I'm going to bring my gear inside. I'm not going to leave my mount and cameras and, you know, $3,000 worth of gear sitting outside, you know, just because there's a cover. So, but when it's, you know, relatively nice weather for a few weeks at a time, no need to. That's the whole idea behind it. So, I'm going to try that for probably nebula season. So throughout the summertime. And if I find that I am able to image a lot more often, then I'll probably end up building a small observatory in that spot, and likely pouring the actual concrete pier, which I already have the tube for, and then, you know, make it a more permanent situation. If I find that the conditions are just not good enough to warrant building an observatory, because again, I'm in Bortle 7 skies here in Charlotte. And I also have some really tall trees in my southern skies, which really stinks. I can get Orion, no problem. But when you talk about lower nebula in the summertime, Northern Hemisphere, they're a lot harder to get. Like, I don't think I'll be able to get the Pillars, Eagle Nebula, you know, those sorts of targets though I'm not certain yet. I suppose I could go outside and do a little bit of math and figure it out, but haven't had clear skies again for a couple of weeks. So anyway, stay tuned on that, and I'll be happy to kind of tell you guys how it all works out as things unfold. Also, I wanted to mention we have a couple new members to our Patreon and members only Discord. So I wanted to give a shout out to our new members. That would be Dr. Schweizer. I hope I didn't botch the pronunciation there. And Ben as well. So welcome to the both of you. I know the crew inside the chat has given you a nice warm welcome as well. And just super happy to have you guys there. Thank you so much for supporting the show. And I'm very happy to say we have 20 members on the Patreon now. So that continues to grow at an awesome rate. And I just, again, thank you guys so much for the support. It means everything to me, and really does motivate me to continue making the show each and every week, and also helps pay for a lot of the fees associated with the podcast. So if you'd like to join us in the Discord, you can just go to patreon.com/the Astrocast. You can donate at levels of $1 or $5 per month and get access to that members only chat. We're in there every day talking about anything and everything astrophotography. We even had a few bird moments as of late, which I always love. Dr. Schweizer actually posted some really awesome images of some birds that he was able to capture recently. And just a shout out to all the members in the group. You guys know who you are. Thank you so much for being awesome. And a special shout out to Sarek, who is likely going to be the first moderator on our members only Discord. He's got some really good ideas to expand the channel a little bit, and I think we're going to be talking about that very soon. I just need to clear a little bit of time in my schedule and set something up with him so we can get together and chat about it. So stay tuned for that. More to come. Meanwhile, in astronomy news, how about this asteroid that's been in the news over the last couple of weeks? 2024 YR4 near-Earth asteroid pass is going to happen in 2032, so 7 years from now. And it might be different by the time you're listening to this, but over the last few days, the odds have been increasing, and they currently sit at 1 in 32, which, as far as I can remember, is about the highest odds that I've ever seen. That is actually a really good question. I'm looking into it right now, and it looks like Apophis had a 1 in 37 chance of hitting in 2029 at one point. But again, it's 1 in 32 now for 2024 YR4. So I think this might be the highest chances that we've ever had historically of an asteroid impacting Earth. If you know of one that has had higher chances and ended up obviously not hitting Earth, because we're still having this conversation, though, to be clear, this asteroid would not necessarily be a civilization ending type event. It's not like a comet hitting the Earth. However, that's not to downplay it at all. It could absolutely destroy a large city. And if it ends up hitting, it looks like most of the path that has been calculated thus far are on cities relatively near the equator. Probably wouldn't happen. Anybody north of Florida and the northern hemisphere would likely not have to worry. But that still leaves a ton of population, obviously, that could be impacted. Now, all that being said, even though 1 in 32 sounds super scary when you read about it, everything that I've seen thus far, most astronomers and astrophysics folks seem to agree that it is extremely likely that as they continue to calculate the projection, that number will start to reduce and eventually make its way down to zero. That being said, as of today on 2/19, 1 in 32 chance of hitting the Earth, which I'm going to ask you, like, if somebody, I don't know, handed you a pill and said, all right, swallow this, you got a 1 in 32 chance of dying, I don't think you'd swallow it. I know I wouldn't anyway. So that's kind of crazy. But certainly worth mentioning since it is astronomy related. So we'll keep a close eye on that one. And if anything changes, I will be sure to notify you guys. It's been all over the news, but if you somehow haven't heard about it, again, 2024 YR4 is the name of the asteroid. So check that out. We also have a really, really cool event coming up next month in March. If you haven't heard yet, we have a blood moon total lunar eclipse happening, and that's going to be taking place March 13th through the 14th. So it's going to be kind of an overnight thing. The penumbral is going to begin just before 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then total eclipse will happen at just shy of 1:30, 1:26 a.m. Maximum eclipse at 1:58 a.m. Total eclipse ending at 2:30 a.m. And then the penumbral exit ends at 5 a.m. So it'll definitely be a long night for those of us who want to, check out the blood moon. I will certainly be among them. I can very, very clearly remember a few years back whenever we had our last blood moon eclipse, and it was let me think, when was it? See, I guess 3 years ago. November 2022 was when the last blood moon eclipse was, and that was not terribly long after I had gotten into astrophotography. I did have like a full rig at that point. And was able to take images using my telescope. I also used, I want to say, a Canon Rebel to photograph that one as well. I didn't have a whole lot of nice lenses at that point, if memory serves correctly. I've got, everything you could want to shoot a total lunar eclipse now, though. So although looking back at my images from the last blood moon, they were pretty nice. But now that I understand how quickly the moon moves, I think I will be able to expose it much better. I'll likely do lucky imaging during the total eclipse phase. So hopefully what I'm hoping to do this year is actually, I'll probably use my Canon R5. I will place it on my Star Adventure GTI mount. I will slew to the moon and have it track the moon. And I will center it up using, trying to think, with the full frame camera and the 800 f11 lens. I believe if I do 4K video, that it will take up the whole screen, but not cut off any bits of the moon. I'll have to experiment with that a little bit over the coming weeks. I ain't got too long to experiment because we're not going to have another full moon before then, I don't think. Are we? Let me think about that. No more full moons until then. But I can see the dark part of the moon no problem whenever I'm zoomed in that close on it. So I'll definitely be using the R5 and video. And then whenever we get to the total blood moon phase, I will record that 4K video. Heck, I might even do 8K video because the R5 can do it. So, I mean, why the heck not, right? And then split up those frames, stack them together, hopefully get, 300-400 really good frames out of it. If you don't know how to do lucky imaging, we actually have a great episode on it that you can go back and listen to. There's also a ton of great tutorials online about lucky imaging. And it's basically, the idea behind it is that you record a video of a planetary object. So, Jupiter, the moon, Saturn would be a good example if you had the focal length. You take the video and then you extract all of the frames individually, because obviously video is just individual frames put together. And then you find the very best frames that line up the nicest and have the least amount of atmospheric disturbance in the image. And then you stack all of those together. And that's how you would generally get something like a quote unquote mineral moon photo, which are the really beautiful, very detailed photos of the moon that have color to them because of the iron content of the moon. That is done via Lucky Imaging. So I'm going to try to do it, this time with the R5, and then I'll likely also have the R7 going, and probably with the 100 to 400 lens. And I want to do, the shots where you can see the prenumbral phase on both sides and it'll show the moon, a dozen times, and in the middle will be the full blood moon. I want to get one of those shots. I've always wanted to do one of them, but I've just never really tried to do it before. So going to try to do that as well. And maybe we'll talk about that again as the lunar blood moon approaches. Maybe we can do a special episode on that, so I can give you guys all some detailed instructions on exactly how to do that. So that's certainly something to look forward to. If you are interested in that, let me know. Astrocast@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. Let me know. I'll probably cover it though, because it seems like a logical thing to talk about over the coming weeks. I also thought I'd mention, I had a listener of the show reach out to me. I'm not going to get into specifics as far as names and details, but they are starting a new optics company and asked me if I would be happy to test one of their filters that they're going to be releasing, which I guess is going to be their first product. And I, of course, said, oh, I'd love to, because obviously light pollution is something that I deal with a whole lot at home. And I'm always looking for a great light pollution filter. So that's something to look forward to as well. So I'll have a new review, hopefully coming for you guys in the coming months, for a brand new light pollution filter. So hoping that ends up working out. Shout out to you. You know who you are. We'll talk more over the coming weeks as that develops. I hope the product development is going well for you. And if and when we do talk about that, obviously I'll give you guys my honest opinion on it. And hopefully it works very well and ends up being a great device, because there aren't a whole lot of, well, I guess there are a few options for light pollution, but they vary a great deal depending on, what your specific needs are. If you need to do, in-camera light pollution filter, like I kind of want to do with my R5, you've heard me talk about in the past. I know Ioptron makes a really good one. And then there's, I think, maybe one or two other in-camera style filters, but obviously most folks tend to use like a 2-inch mounted filter, or 32 millimeter filters in a filter wheel. Filter wheel is generally what you see in astrophotography. So not sure of the form factor yet, but I'll let you know when all the details come in. But I'm certainly looking forward to telling you guys all about that as well. We had a question pop up in the Discord that I thought would be a good one to address on the podcast. One of our newer members by the name of Ben asked about exposure time. So we're all kind of dealing with crappy weather as of late. I don't know why. Usually winter's great around here as far as compared to summertime, but we've had a whole lot of clouds. So he brought up a good point. He said, on these nights where we have a limited amount of clear sky, say 3 hours, is it better to do a lot of short exposures, say 30 seconds, or get as many longer exposures, say 3 minutes, as you can? And we got an answer back from one of our more seasoned members of the Discord chat. And he was right on the money with his response in saying that sort of thing really depends on the overall brightness of the object that you are imaging. And what I mean by that is, if you are imaging something incredibly bright, like Orion, you can probably get away no problem with doing 30-second exposures. However, if you're imaging something really dim, like let's say a galaxy, let's say like in my neck of the woods, a 30-second exposure of the Triangulum galaxy would pretty much give you nothing after an auto stretch on the ASI Air. You just won't see anything after 30 seconds. But a 3-minute exposure, and you can see the faint outline of the galaxy. And another thing to consider is the noise that gets introduced by having shorter exposures versus longer exposures. So all things being equally, I think technically speaking, signal is signal. And if you're properly stacking all the signal, a lot of people will tell you technically it doesn't make a difference. In my experience, I find that on dimmer objects, doing longer exposures of, let's say, 3 to 5 minutes, generally results in a much, much better image with a lot less noise. So if you are new to astrophotography and you've asked yourself, like many of us have, what is the ideal exposure time? I would suggest playing around with it a little bit. If you're lucky enough to have a cooled astronomy camera, one of the great things about having one is you have the ability to build a dark library. And if you don't know, a dark library is basically just a collection of dark frames that you can make on a cloudy day. Heck, you can make it whenever you want. And then you can use those as your darks for any of your sessions moving forward. So generally what I'll do every, say, 3 to 6 months, I try to do it every time the seasons change. I'll make a new dark library. So I'll do a, 5-second, 30-second, 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, and 5 minute set of darks. So I'll do, say 30 of each. And that way, if I am imaging Orion one night and I want to do an HDR composite, I can take 5-second exposures and then calibrate those to my 5-second darks. And then I can also take, let's say, 3-minute exposures to get some of the fainter details, the nebulosity on the outside of Orion, and then use the 3-minute darks to calibrate those frames. So the beauty of having a cooled astronomy camera is you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. You don't got to worry about making new darks every single time you're out in the field. And you can combine those sets of exposures. One of the things that I mentioned on the show a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the HDR Orion image is the fact that we don't have a lot of great HDR tools for astrophotography yet. And I'm really, really hoping that changes over the coming year, because to me, HDR is kind of one of the best things we could do with astrophotography, because there's so many really faint details and so many extremely bright details in a lot of these nebula that we image on a regular basis. So play around with it. But my general rule of thumb personally is I go for 3-minute exposure. So, on the average object, if such a thing exists in space, I generally go for 180-second exposures. I find that it's a good balance. You don't waste too much time dithering. If you got 60 seconds, you're going to be dithering obviously more often than you would with a 3-minute exposure. And then, another thing that I will just briefly mention to you, since we're talking about dithering, is if you find, I saw this brought up in our chat a couple weeks ago, if I remember correctly, if it's taking a long, long time for your mount to settle after a dither, and you're using an ASI Air or any software, because it's customizable within the dithering settings in Nina and K-Stars, whatever you're using, you might want to increase the degrees a little bit on, how much it needs to stay still for how long. You can do it in the ASI Air very easily by going into the dithering settings and just move that up a little bit. So basically, instead of, 2 arc seconds, make it 4 arc seconds. So maybe 4 isn't the best, because you probably want it to be a little bit lower than 4 arc seconds. But I think by default, it's somewhere in the 2 range, as in it needs to be under 2 arc seconds for X number of seconds before it will start imaging again. And if you notice that it's taking a long time, try bumping that up, make it 3 arc seconds for 3 seconds. You know what I mean? Let it settle under 3 arc seconds for 3 seconds, and then let it start imaging again. And then just check the quality of your photos after those subs come in. Zoom in really close, look and make sure that your stars are nice and round still. And that could save you a ton of time with auto guiding and dithering. It's something that I did on my Star Adventure GTI, because I noticed it was taking forever to settle early on. And I just increased it by 1 arc second. and then I shortened the settle time by 1 second. And now, it dithers very quickly and doesn't take nearly as long. So just a little bit of advice in case you run into a similar situation. If it happened to me, it could probably happen to you as well. So I figured it was worth mentioning. I also thought it might be worth mentioning. There's been a lot of updates to PixInsight recently, particularly with scripts and plugins. It seems like this year we've seen quite a few updates. So if you haven't had a look around, Easy Processing Suites had a lot of updates. The RC Astro tools, you're talking, Blur Exterminator, Noise Exterminator, Star Exterminator, have all had updates as well. There's also, I read about one called Variable Star Observer. It was just released this month, and my understanding is it's basically for variable star enthusiasts. So if you like to measure the magnitude of stars from, say, month to month, for example, Venus would be a perfect example. If you wanted to check the magnitude of that star and then come back and check it again in a couple of weeks and see what the difference is between the two, then this tool can actually help you do that. So definitely check it out. It's called VSO, or Variable Stars Observer. Really, really cool tool. It looks like one Joel Valier actually developed it. It does quite a few things, and it's very, very easy to use. Just one click. It will tell you basically the average magnitude for each variable star, and then you can actually bring up a comparison image and check, the same star for average magnitude at a different time. It'll compute all of the magnitudes of stars within your image, obviously, and a whole lot of other neat features. I personally find it really interesting. Not particularly, I don't know. I mean, obviously it's astrophotography related, but more on the scientific side. But I personally love those types of things because I am trying to get more and more into the scientific side of things when it comes to observing. In particular, one thing that I really want to try this year during galaxy season is taking a stab at some more scientific observations in terms of tracking objects in the night sky like asteroids. So if you've never done it before, PixInsight actually has some really neat tools, such as the annotate image tool and ephemerides, forgive me if I botch that, that actually allow you to do things like find out if there is an asteroid in any given image that you're looking at. And this would probably be a good time to mention, as I've mentioned many, many, many times before on the show, that, joining a local astronomy club gives you access, generally speaking, to much bigger telescopes and a lot of times just better gear than what you would have at home. For example, our club has, some massive telescopes that you have to climb a ladder to view. And these types of, large aperture telescopes are perfect for viewing things like the aforementioned Asteroid 2024 YR4. So this is actually going to be visible through, I think they say generally like an 8-inch telescope is recommended to see it. But I'm thinking if you're doing, long exposure astrophotography, you could probably spot it. It's visible. It should remain visible until about April right now. Now, if you need to know how to spot it, I've got a good tip for you as far as, locating where it is in the night sky. What you're going to want to do is open up Stellarium. Great application, obviously. I've mentioned it many times on the show, and it's got a lot of really deep features if you're willing to get in there and really mess around. It's not, I guess I would say it's not the most user-friendly program in terms of how it's designed. One thing that particularly annoys me is how it always seems to, well, by default, it opens in full screen and then you got to press F11 and my monitor cuts out because it's an OLED and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, you can change that if you save your current settings at startup, which is a different thing. But anyway, open up Stellarium and go into your configuration window. If you're on Windows, you can just press F2. And then what you're going to want to do is go over to plugins. And from plugins, you want to scroll down on the left-hand side. You'll see a lot of different menus. Go down to Solar System Editor, and then you'll see a couple different options. Go ahead and check Load at Startup if it's not already checked, and then click on Configure. Now from here, you got a couple of different options, but what we want to do specifically, up top, you'll see 3 tabs: Configuration File, Solar System, and About. Go ahead and click on Solar System, and then you're going to select Import Orbital Elements in MPC format. And then you'll get an option here for an online search or lists. In this case, what I did is I actually selected Get Orbital Elements after doing an online search for 2024 YR4. You also have the ability to download entire list of numbered objects. And what you can do is from the list tab under Select the Source, there's a Select Bookmark option. Click the little drop down there and then scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you will find a couple of different options for near Earth objects and near Earth asteroids. My first guess was going to be there's one on here, potentially hazardous asteroids, but believe it or not, it didn't show up under that. Might just be because the info hasn't been updated yet for this particular asteroid. But if you select the one that says near Earth asteroids and then click Get Orbital Elements, it'll go ahead and load everything up for you. It'll give you a list. You can hit Mark All and then import them all. I don't recommend doing that because it can take quite a while to download all those elements. If you're just wanting to see, this one asteroid, type in the number 2024 space YR4, and it should come right up for you. Go ahead and select that and then click Add Object. Now, I will say when you add it, it will, obviously it'll show you where it is. Once you close out, press F3 to bring up your search window, type in 2024 YR4, and then it will center right on where the object is. But what you won't see is the actual object itself. And it could be another setting within Stellarium that I haven't figured out yet. I know how to, turn on Deep Sky Survey and the HIPS survey as well. But neither of those appear to be showing it. But anyway, right now, that particular object, it's just east of Canis Minor. So right around Procyon currently. So very, very visible in our night skies if you have enough aperture to see it. Again, a great time to go down to your local observatory and see if you can check it out. But if any of you guys have like a decent Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope, perhaps you've got like a C8, or if you're lucky, maybe a C11 or something along those lines, I'd be willing to bet you can spot this from your backyard if you've got dark skies. But let me know if any of you guys are able to successfully view this asteroid. Please let me know. I'm very curious. I haven't seen anybody talk about it yet. I realize it's pretty small in the grand scheme of things, very, very tiny. But as we know, with long exposure photography, size isn't a huge limiting factor as long as we're gathering that reflected light from the object. Guys, I might have to take back everything I just said about this cool asteroid as far as spotting it. I just looked up the apparent magnitudes, I think 24.5 right now. So very unlikely to actually see or capture that one. So I apologize. I probably should have looked up the magnitude before I started talking about it, but this does work nonetheless. I've spotted many asteroids myself doing astrophotography, and you absolutely can too. And hey, if it ends up swinging back around and coming back to smack into Earth, chances are you will be able to see it at some point. So hopefully it won't end up like Bart's Comet, if anyone knows that particular episode of The Simpsons. But you won't need a telescope then. And you can go burn down the observatory so this never happens again. In all seriousness, though, PixInsight really does have some amazing tools. If you haven't played around with the annotate image feature specifically in PixInsight, oh man, do I recommend that you give it a try. It'll open up like a whole new world of astronomy to you when you're able to actually, see all of the various named objects within your photo. It gets really cool whenever you do some ultra wide field stuff. And I'm talking like, get out your 135 or smaller even lens. I'm known to use, a 50 millimeter lens to do astrophotography. And then if you go through and annotate that image, it will blow your mind. I'm thinking back to my annotated image in Galaxy season last year. I made just a short video on Reddit I think it was TikTok actually, explaining how many galaxies are visible in one image from the 135 millimeter Rokinon lens. And it's just absolutely mind blowing. And what's really cool is you can pick what you want annotated and what you do not want annotated. So for example, if you wanted to look specifically for asteroids and comets, you could go through and plate solve the image within PixInsight and then go and annotate the image and turn everything else off except for asteroids and comets, and then run your image and see what you picked up. In fact, you can go back through your old images, resolve them, and then check them to see if you did capture any. Chances are you've got a few, because if you go into Stellarium, like I just advised, and download the list of, near Earth asteroids, you're going to kind of have your mind blown by how many of them have been discovered just in 2024 alone. I was scrolling down that list and I was like, oh my goodness. So quite a few are out there, obviously. I don't think enough gets talked about in terms of the science that goes into searching for the asteroids and comets that could potentially destroy us. Work like the Atlas telescope very famously does in the astronomical community is just completely invaluable. So whenever I hear people talking about cutting funding for things like, Atlas or, any technologies that we're using to monitor comets and asteroids, I just think to myself, like, oh boy, what are you going to do with all that money when Earth no longer exists, after a giant comet hits, like took out the dinosaurs? And I mean, the reality is that there are thousands upon thousands of NEOs out there, near Earth objects. And thanks to the hard work by people at NASA and all of the other amazing amateur and professional astronomical societies and government agencies all over the globe, I'm talking Pan-STARRS, NEO, all of our great telescopes and astronomers that work tirelessly to protect us from these types of things. They really do amazing work, and there's still quite a bit to be done. But we have managed to catalog roughly 95% of the near Earth asteroids that are larger than a kilometer in diameter. Those are generally considered the most hazardous, just because of the size and the global devastation if they were to impact Earth. But for smaller asteroids, 140 meters, like YR 2024 YR4, we've only got estimated 30 to 40% of those cataloged. So, I mean, just think about that. Asteroids that could take out all of New York City in an instant, we've only got about 30 to 40% of those cataloged. So yeah, there is still lots of work to be done in that regard. Thank God the DART mission was successful. Back in 2021, NASA launched a spacecraft, and in 2022, they were able to make contact with a small orbiting body called Didymos. It was actually going around a larger body called Dimorphos, but basically the goal of the mission was to find out if we could actually redirect an asteroid. So if, all the cards were on the table and we knew an asteroid was coming at us, Bruce Willis and Armageddon type situation, could we actually deflect said asteroid? And it was successful. So it just goes to show you some of the, government funding out there is very, very, very well spent. So I hope that NASA and, similar space agencies throughout Earth continue to do all of that amazing work. And I guess I'll just say thank you to all of the people that work on those missions day in and day out for us. All right, enough doom and gloom about asteroids. I don't want to scare anyone. I don't think that this one's going to be an actual hazard, but at a 1 in 32 chance, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. And we should absolutely be thankful that things like DART exist. If you ever want to hear someone a lot smarter than me talk about asteroids that could potentially impact Earth, I would recommend that you go check out Neil deGrasse Tyson. He has spoken on it countless times on YouTube. Just literally search Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about asteroids on YouTube. In fact, I will link one of my favorite videos of him speaking about this particular phenomenon in the show notes if you would like to check it out. All right, so recommendations this week. I have a fun one for you. If you are a particular type of person who enjoys a particular type of television, and that would be anime. I'm not a huge anime guy. Don't get me wrong. I've watched all the classics, Dragon Ball, Outlaw Star, that sort of thing. But these days I don't watch all the anime that comes out, but my brother does. And I was hanging out with him last week, and me and him haven't taken a trip like that together in quite some time. So of course he wanted to share some of his favorites with me, and I shared some of my favorite stuff with him. And anyway, he turned me on to a show called Dr. Stone. It's a really awesome anime. I won't spoil it for you, but one of the premises of the show is that he generally explains a different scientific principle in every episode and kind of shows you how it works, why it works, etc. And astronomy is very heavily featured after the first, I won't spoil it for you, but check it out. You will definitely like it if you're a fan of anime and science. That much I can promise you. There's an English sub version if you're like me and don't like reading the whole time. I'm sorry, I know that's sacrilege to say, but I prefer hearing things in my native tongue. Even though apparently I didn't know this, sidebar here. Goku apparently is supposed to sound like basically a hillbilly in Japan. That's what his vocal actor is going for and doing in Dragon Ball. And you don't really get that vibe at all in the American version. But if you kind of think about it, if you've seen the show, he's often farming and riding around on a tractor and lives out in the boonies. I didn't know that, but he explained that to me and I was like, wow, that really does make sense. But Dr. Stone, highly recommend giving that one a look. That's pretty much going to do it for us this week, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to me ramble about, Stellarium, Pix Insight, asteroids, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's kind of the Jeffrey of episodes if I've ever seen one. So we'll be back next week. I've been doing a little bit of research and development on the next very astrophotography-centric episode, which is going to be debuting next week on hopefully Tuesday night. I'm hoping to get it out Tuesday night. I got to record a little bit more over the weekend. So if everything goes as planned, we'll be back to Tuesday starting next week. So thank you so much for listening to the Astrocast. I am your host, Rue. If you would like to support the show, please feel free to visit us at patreon.com/the Astrocast. You can find me on Facebook. Just look up the Astrocast and you will see our logo there. Give us a follow. Go on, say hello. I love hearing from you guys. Quite a few people have stopped by and said hello via the Facebook page. So if you don't feel like donating to come in and chat with us in the chat room, you can always stop by Facebook and say hello. So thank you so much for tuning in this week. We will be back next week with another new episode. And as always, clear skies.
Turn Super Saiyan. Then you go one step beyond that to a Super Saiyan 2, an Ascended Saiyan. And this is to go even further beyond.
Dig deep, deplete beats and grease cheese. Heat seek, defeat, beat, release with ease. Come on and meddle with me, I'ma settle the beat. With each level I reach, I level cities, level anybody who isn't already steady. On level 3, rapping no remorse, so vocal cords go hoarse. Transform and scorch into a powerful force. I'm a part of the course and it devours the source. You're destined to lose, stick your neck in the noose. I'll let you learn how to fuse, but you better produce. Start attacking me soon, I'm daring you to. When the smoke clears, I'll be staring at you. I know you're confused, so prepare to be bruised. Make up your moves, you think that's wrong rap? Keep depending on gimmicks, you got the wrong map. Cause I'm pushing my limits and then beyond that.
Tap into that, you become a Super Saiyan 3.
There once was a man, a long time ago, who walked across land until he found the flow. Hands began to glow till the power grow. Exile was born and now you know. Battling eternal dragons for the earthly dynamic. Traveling the furthest galaxies, searching for planets. I trained of Saturn's rings. What could you do to us? We fought the likes of Lucifer in the eye of Jupiter. You better hope this is a contest of who can rhyme the fastest. My mind multiplies in masses, time passes. Try and manage ways to crack wine glasses. My lines grind the atlas in a bite-sized tablets. You are now engaged in a fight you'll never win. You can shine brighter for now, but my light will never dim. Crush cities in an instant, spare kiddies and infants. The fifth dimension, wicked henchmen with sick intentions. What's left is the remains and stenches of my victims. The witness said he moved too quick for description. 1 second he was here, then drifting into the distance. I thought I heard him say, no pity for resistance.
I'm sorry that took so much longer than the others, but I haven't had much occasion to practice this one. This is what I call a Super Saiyan 3.
The man was just too strong, nothing could have stopped him. You cannot weigh out your options, knowledge is flawless. I call this demolishing metropolitans quicker than politics. Your destinies to die in space, nothing but flow dust. I'm blowing up planets cause meeting my quotas is tough. I don't think you wanna try that. I take you right now with one arm behind my back, trained by the sword, not the gas. Slice boulders in half, focus on the fight now. Gotta let go of the past, time is now a factor. The blowing up the west hood, I'll block you from the city while I travel treats the goods. A murderous entity with so much energy that no one can measure. For many centuries, I must focus now. So for hours I meditate, you can blow it up to pieces, but still it regenerate.
Oh, you finally did it. You look a little different.
That's right. Not only am I freaky looking, I'm stronger, I'm faster, and I'm ready for action.
Oh man, that takes me back. No, you're not crazy. You didn't just get transferred to a weird podcast about Dragon Ball rap. That was the year 2002. We actually had a little band, well, rap group back then. And I just thought it'd be fun to toss one of our old songs in. Clear skies.